Ladies and gentlemen, the race is about to begin. Is everybody in? Is everybody in?
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the All Star Race broadcast, one of our Race Arena editions. This is actually the first time that producer Josh and I have been in our studio since the sports lost Kyle Busch. So that having been said, I want to start this off with a prayer for Kyle's family. So if you would just bear with me while I get this out there, and then we'll get into the show, and we'll have a lot of fun. Got a special guest host coming on board, and so with that having been said, if you can pray with me or choose not to, that's up to you. This will say, Lord, bless the Busch family, heal their wounds, mend their shattered hearts, and lift them above their sorrows. Father, allow the memories of their time with Kyle as a father, husband, son, brother, and friend be happy memories that'll bring smiles back to their sad faces and joy to their hearts that now have an unfathomable hole that can never be filled. Lord, we know that you are so good all the time, and just want to say thank you for the years that you did give Kyle or that we had with Kyle, especially his family and friends. In Jesus' name, I pray. Amen. So that having been said, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, I'm stealing y'all away from other Derek for a second so I can tell y'all about our brilliant sponsor, Gray Before Shave. Gray Before Shave offers everything you could possibly need for your hair up there. They've got oils, balms, butters. They've got waxes for your mustache, shampoo, conditioner. There's so much stuff. I don't have the time to sit here and tell you about everything. Head over to their website, graybeforeshave.com. See something you like, take it to the checkout. Before you check out, apply the code ALSO-RAN for 15% off your purchase. If you're undecided on which scent is right for you, they have an excellent bundle of oils that has one of each of their brilliant scents. I prefer the Pumpkin Smash. My wife absolutely loves their brand new Liquid Gold. It smells like adult bubble gum. That's the only way I can think to describe it. So head over there, graybeforeshave.com. Find something you like, check it out, use our discount code ALSO-RAN for 15% off. You won't be disappointed. Now, back to that other handsome bearded fella.
Super psyched for this show. I'm going to bring out producer Josh and our super special guest host, Rick Houston.
What's happening?
Hey, how's it going? Rick, thank you so much for joining the show. Rick was not planned until last minute. This was initially supposed to be a little bit of a different show, a little more of a healing show for a buddy of ours that is with Richard Childress Racing. But obviously things behind the scenes at Richard Childress Racing have been a bit hectic and busy since we lost Kyle. So obviously they're busy over there. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I want to start by we're gonna talk about Kyle for a little while. He's got 234 total wins, 63 Cup Series wins, 102 O'Reilly Series wins. He's got 69 Truck Series wins. The 69th, which came less than a week before he passed away. He competed for 22 Cup seasons, 19 straight seasons with a win. He's got 4 Crown Jewel victories and 2 Cup titles. And those are numbers that, some people will say, can you compare that to Richard Petty's 200 wins? That's up for debate. I think what we all have to bear in mind is different points in time when these things happen. You know, Richard Petty was running against different competitors, and the seasons were structured differently back then. They had a lot more races, but undeniably, you can't argue with the big number, 234 total wins. I mean, there's been a lot of drivers that have come and gone that competed in Cup and trucks and O'Reilly and don't come near those numbers. So, yeah. Substantial loss for, like, I know I didn't have the opportunity to know Kyle personally. And this is just my perspective. And I'm sorry, fellas, if I'm going to be a bit long-winded with this, but we had talked a little bit pre-show that I've never experienced a loss outside of my family where it feels like the loss of an individual just like it's not real. You know, like I started watching the sport in 2004 and Kyle Busch was already in the sport, and you know, he was young and he was coming up, but he was already making his way. And in the years that I've been watching, you know, Kyle Busch has always been there. He's been playing the role of the bad guy, and you know, he was the guy that you love to boo, and you know, he was the anti-hero. You know, you got your Chase Elliott's out there, and you want to see them do good, and everybody loves a Chase Elliott, and everybody loved his dad, Bill Elliott, and but it reminds me, a lot of people say that when Dale Sr. died, he wasn't as beloved before he passed away. Now, I could be wrong. I wasn't watching the sport back then. Rick, I'm going to defer to you on this in a second. But, you know, a lot of people didn't like Senior because he went out there and was winning so much and won the 7 championships. And I can only compare that to Jimmy Johnson, you know, Josh's ex-favorite racer. I didn't like
ex-favorite. Okay, I got to hear that story.
But yeah, so watching Kyle, I feel like as my passion for the sport grew and my love for the sport grew, and I watched the sport progress from different cars and saw different drivers come and go and have their highs and lows, Kyle Busch has been a constant. And for whenever you just say out loud, Kyle Busch, you know, Kyle Busch is dead. He's passed. He's not going to be there. And it just doesn't, the reality of the situation, luckily I'm blessed to where I don't have to go through the heartache and the heartbreak as the people do that are going through that knew him personally and were there on the team with him or worked around him. But yeah, it's just, and the only other thing I can think of, which I think it's kind of ironic the way things worked out, because Rick initially was not going to be our guest host tonight, but through happenstance, Rick is here, and Rick has been there for some other tragedies in the sport. And so I'm going to, at this point, Rick, I'm going to defer to you unless Josh wants to say anything. I just wanted to get that out there. I think Kyle Busch was the first time I ever had positive feelings for Kyle Busch, and I never hated anybody. Hate is a very strong, ugly, nasty term. I never hate anybody. But Kyle Busch was somebody I enjoyed to dislike. And then the first time I ever had a little bit of change of perspective was when he broke his legs in the O'Reilly race at Daytona. And I was like, man, I hope, you know, with the way that everything's structured, I hope he comes back and wins a race. And typical Kyle Busch fashion, the guy that you love to not like, the son of a gun not only comes back and wins a race, wins multiple races and wins the championships. And I'm like, okay, see that, Kyle? That is why I can't like you, because I wanted you to do good. I wanted you to do a little bit of good, but I still wanted my guy, Brad Keselowski, to walk away with a championship. And then here you go, taking away a taking away a championship. And then when he went through what he went through his last years at Joe Gibbs, struggling to be competitive, and then going to RCR. It's like when he went to RCR, for me personally, it was like a breath of fresh air. It's like, okay, this is a Kyle Busch I can finally pull for, because you've seen him down in the dumps. You've seen him struggling. This is a point where he can not start over, but start down a positive path to maybe winning another championship. And the family perspective of that, as that's going on, his son is getting into racing. He's racing with his son. You got the Busch versus Busch battles and the Legends cars and all that. And, now, and that's why I say, I think that being sad about the situation is natural, but he got to spend 41 years of his life here on earth. Been a beautiful wife, beautiful children, had friends, family, and that's something that a lot of people didn't get to have. I think of my friend Angela Savage, whose father, Swede Savage, was killed as a result of a crash he had in 1973 Indianapolis 500. She never got to know her father. Her mom was pregnant with her when Swede died. So just those two different perspectives, Kyle got a chance to be, to start to teach his son about racing and other things. And there's going to be conversations that he'll never get to have with Brexton or with his daughter. Conversations that a mature mind, sometimes they don't think about. I didn't think about some of these questions that I wanted to ask my father until he would pass. And it's ridiculous questions. It's things that aren't very substantial, but it's little questions that, so on a personal note, my mother passed away shortly after my father did. And when my father had passed, you automatically go to your backup, which is my mom. It's like, well, if I have any questions about my dad, I'll just ask my mom. Even though they had been divorced for over 40 years, questions you don't think to ask, like, what was it like dating? What was my dad like when you were dating him? Like, what made you fall in love with him? What kind of guy was he before I was born? And then when I lost my mother, it's like you realize there's questions that you'll never have the answers to. And I think that is, for me, the part where I feel for Brexton, especially knowing that Brexton is in the infancy of what could be a spectacular career, that he'll have his uncle Kurt, but he won't have his dad anymore. And I think that's all I got to say about that for now. I've been very long-winded, and I've got two guest hosts here. So, Rick, for comparison, the only thing I can compare this situation to is when the sport lost Alan Kulwicki and Davey Allison within such a short time span, so close together.
Yeah. Well, I can only tell you this from my perspective. I just, ever since the news that Kyle had passed, it's really ironic because within just the past 2 weeks before that, we had finished up on the Same Vault podcast production on a 10-episode series that I called Firestorm. And it was all about the years 2000, 2001 in NASCAR, which were just, I was there. And it was an absolutely horrible time because in those 2 years, we lost 5 drivers. And so the emotions that we're feeling right now with Kyle, we were literally feeling basically every other month, every 2 or 3 months. And, of course, everybody knew Dale Earnhardt. He lost his, obviously he lost his life on the last lap of the 2001 Daytona 500. which was just this monumental loss. And losing Kyle this past week, and again, I didn't know Kyle. He was coming into the sport as I was basically transitioning out full time. So I didn't have that personal connection to him. But I was in New Hampshire when Adam Petty lost his life. I spoke to him that morning and joked with him. And of course, we had basically watched Adam grow up. His picture was in Grand National Scene when he was a week old. So the racing community, he literally grew up in front of the racing community. And I remember the emotions of that weekend as if they happened yesterday. And then we lost Kenny Irwin. And then we lost Tony Roper. And I knew Tony. Tony had called me that off season and wanted to know if I had heard of any rides that were open. And so he was one of the good guys. Now you talked during the pre-show about having a soft spot for the also rans, for the underdogs, and Tony Roper defined underdog. And so to lose him was a shock. I knew his wife, and beautiful, beautiful lady, and just as friendly as, just as country as she could be. And she lost her husband. Then we go to Daytona in February, and one of my most vivid memories of that sport, of being involved in NASCAR full time. I was the Busch Series editor for Winston Cup Scene. And so I was in the press box that night after Randy LaJoie won the Busch Series season opener in 2001. And my wife and I, in January of 2001, we had twin sons. And my wife had gotten the first studio portrait. And she emailed me a copy of that photo. And that was back during the days of dial-up. So it took forever to download this photo. But down on the racetrack, while I was downloading that photo and waiting for it to download, was Dale Earnhardt taking Terry Bradshaw around Daytona in a pace car. They were doing this Fox promo or whatever. And I just have this memory of them coming to a stop on pit road. I believe it was on pit road, but right there in front of the press box. They climbed out of the car, got out, and they celebrated like they were in victory lane. And less than 24 hours later, Dale was gone. Well, then at the end of the year, there was Blaze Alexander. He got killed in the ARCA race. And within less than 2 weeks, NASCAR mandated the Hans device, which was the all-time game changer of all game changers, along with other safety things that were going on. So for Kyle to have this just crazy illness and be taken so suddenly, that brought back a lot of memories, and they're not good memories. You mentioned Alan Kulwicki and Davey Allison. I remember those just like they were yesterday. I wasn't in the sport full time. I was working at a little community newspaper in the mountains of North Carolina. It was my first full-time, quote unquote, real job in journalism. But I was at Bristol that weekend when Alan died, and just the feelings were exactly the same. I don't want to say exactly the same, but there was that same sense of shock as with Kyle. Kyle was just here. Kyle just won the race at Dover, the truck race. Alan Kulwicki was the defending champion. And for him to be taken, that was a big shock for a lot of people. So, I don't know. It hit home for me. I think simply for the biggest reason, we had just finished that 10 episode series, and that was so emotional to get wrapped up in week after week. I produced the podcast and the YouTube channel episodes, and so I was immersed in that week after week, and just when we got back to a more normal format on the podcast, it was a relief because we could laugh and we could joke and we could kid around and we could tell stories that we love telling. But then this happens, and it was just, yeah.
It was a gut punch.
Yeah.
You don't, there's been, like, when Eric McClure passed, it was, okay, here's this driver, he hasn't driven in a while. There's been several drivers that, even if you go back to Tim Richmond, when he passed away, they weren't in the sport competing. It wasn't here 1 second, gone the next. And I think that also, and we've been spoiled since Dale Sr.'s death and Tony Roper, and that's something that I know a lot of people are bitter about, because they feel like there should have been, Hans devices should have been mandated a lot sooner, and he should have never passed away in that ARCA crash. But that having been said, we've kind of gotten spoiled as fans. And if you go over to the bug zapper side of motorsports, Formula One, same thing with them. If you go back to the 1950s and 60s, early 70s, Jackie Stewart said at one point in time it seems like they were burying a friend every other week.
Yeah.
And, thank God for the safety, because you have crashes like where Romain Grosjean had this savage crash where everybody just knew he was gone. And so I think we kind of get spoiled a little too, because we see these savage crashes that just years ago would have been totally different.
Well, I can say this with every bit of certainty possible. I think there's a real danger in complacency, and it's one of the reasons why I felt so compelled to do this just massive project, Firestorm. We cannot let our guards down when it comes to safety. I think that there's a certain sentiment right now that the sport is 100% safe. That's not the case. When you have pieces of machinery going the speeds that they're going right now, and they hit walls and they hit each other, bad things can happen. And so, and especially at Talladega and Daytona, the way that things are now. Now, that's the one soapbox item that I have about today's sport. Well, it's one of the things I have a soapbox about. But Daytona and Talladega, they're nothing more right now than demolition derbies. And I think that they exist to create highlights and crashes. And if you let your guard down, bad things will happen. Can happen. And I don't want to be, I love this sport. I've dedicated 35 years of my life now to it. And if I didn't, why bother? I would have walked away a long time ago. But, and I don't know what the answer is. I'm not a mechanic. I'm not an engineer. I don't know what they can do about Daytona and Talladega, short of digging the place up and making a completely flat track or whatever. I don't have those answers, but I really and truly think that something should be done.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I don't think so. I think, safety as far as the sport on track, safety is a constantly mobile goal, right? You concentrate on one area, you lose sight of something else on the other side. So you constantly have to be pivoting. I think one of the positives to come out of losing Kyle was something that all of us do. Personally, I know I do it a lot. If I wake up and I have an ache, a pain, if I'm feeling under the weather, like, you know what, I'll just rub some dirt on it, and I'll just go on. I'll go on with my life. And the fact that Kyle Busch was actually on the simulator rig shortly before they called the ambulance and whatnot, that shows that maybe, there's certain things that we should pay more attention to. And I'm not saying, I have a sniffle, I'm going to go to the doctor, I'm going to go to the emergency room, anything like that. But there's certain things that, maybe we should pay more attention to. Like if you have a constant something not right, get it taken care of, get it looked at. Dale Jr. did the same thing with concussion protocol. He, for so many years, all these guys, the worst case scenario is, well, not worst case, obviously worst case is death, but Leroy Yarborough, being in an institution and dying in an institution because he tried to murder his mom due to repetitive concussive injuries. Same thing with football players, Junior Seau and countless others that suddenly turned violent out of nowhere. But Dale Jr. was a wake-up call, at least to the motorsports realm of things, where, hey, it's okay to have something wrong. It's okay to admit something's not right and I need to be taken care of. So I think that, having been said, I think that's one thing we can take away from Kyle's passing, that sometimes we need to pay more attention to what's going on in ourselves and our bodies, and act on it. So that way something like this doesn't happen again to anybody anywhere, even if it's just, your grandma down the road or whatever.
Well, this is a drum that I have been banging on, since we started the Same Vault podcast. I don't know how much you guys know about it, but Grand National scene, Winston Cup scene, NASCAR scene for 32 years, it was basically the standard in motorsports journalism. It was the biggest, it was the most influential newspaper in the sport, and I have a complete collection right behind me, every issue ever. I've actually scanned every single issue, 97,000 pages of content. And that's a completely different story.
That's a hell of a hobby.
Yeah, buddy. But no, one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about preserving that content is you go back, you dig in some of those stories from the 80s. There was a race at Bristol, and Dale Earnhardt had been injured in a race, and basically he was all but unconscious in the car for the last half of the race, 200 laps of the race, and he won that night. In today's world, he would have been nowhere near that race car. There are stories of drivers driving with broken legs, broken arms. Today's world, Ricky Rudd never gets in the car at Richmond after having that really bad wreck at Daytona in the Busch Clash. Every year at Daytona they show that accident. And one of the best quotes ever in Grand National scene. Steve Wade, who is my co-host on the podcast, he was the editor of the paper for years and years. He quoted Ricky Rudd in Grand National scene talked to him at Richmond about the injuries he had from Daytona and how he was coping with the pain. And Ricky Rudd was quoted in the paper as saying, "How am I dealing with the pain? 3 lines of cocaine a day." Now, obviously, he was kidding. But, well, there's 2 things there. Number one, he would have never been in the race car today. Number 2, if he had made a comment about snorting cocaine, 3 lines of cocaine a day, he would have been out of there. I mean, he would have been suspended for gosh knows how long.
Right.
But to just see how that mentality has evolved over the years and changed over the years, it's pretty eye-opening. And I will say this there are few things about the sport that I hate worse than an old school race fan pounding their chest and talking about how racing was back when men were real men. I hate that saying. Because back when men were real men, Dover, place like Dover that was so hot and so long a race, that drivers were falling out of the race car and getting relief drivers. They would have like 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 relief drivers every week. Back when men were real men, they were falling out of the race car. You know, so today's mentality is absolutely appropriate, is absolutely spot on. And today, you know, the men are real men. Today's athletes today in the cars would run circles around the competitors from back in the day, physically. Now, I'm not talking about in the race car, and I'm not talking about going door to door or whatever, but the drivers being athletes conversation is much more relevant today than it was back then. I mean, back in the day, David Pearson, Dick Trickle, they had cigarette lighters mounted in the race cars. Now, I'm not saying that they weren't tough. They were tough cusses. And they were men, but they were also getting out of the race car when they needed to. So that's I probably got myself in trouble, but hey, I'm used to that.
Well, Josh, would I gave you my take, and you know, Rick has his comparison to loss in the sport. I know you weren't a big Kyle fan, and I know Kyle's loss, his passing's been kind of different on you. How has it affected you at all? Just
well, you know, I first thought of, you know, selfishly, I thought of, you know, well, hell, he was 41, you know, I'm 40, you know, so that's what I thought of, is like, and like you said, it's very true, and that it does bring awareness. Like, I barely knew anything about pneumonia other than that's what you know, your mom would yell at you, don't be outside, you're going to get pneumonia or whatever, you know, and I don't really know anything. So that did raise awareness, and it does make me think a little bit more about being healthier, or just staying, you know, smart about your decisions about your health, and don't ignore everything. And I think too is rest. I mean, you look at Kyle Busch, and then again, this is not, we don't know any more deeper than anybody else. We're just fans, but I would assume that it could come down to the fact that he doesn't rest, that, you know, he was in a simulator as this happened to him, you know, and it was just a couple of weeks ago at Watkins Glen when he radioed that he needed the doctor at his hauler at the end of the race. So you know, that was 2 weeks before the weekend where then he won a race on Friday night in the truck race. and and then just 4 or 5 days later he passed away. So and it takes so much time, effort, everything to train not only for Cup Series but Cup and Truck or Cup Truck and O'Reilly. So it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of strain, it's a lot of stress. And there's some people that just can't slow down, that they just are workaholics and they just move and don't stop. And so it's rare to hear, like, when we our past with our friends with the Joys, and hearing a story like Randy's, and how he decided that he had this opportunity to go to Cup decades ago, and he decided, well, I like being with my family on Sundays, and so that's what he did. And that's a very unusual story. Most people jump on the gun and go where the money is, or run several leagues. So yeah, it's definitely an eye-opening, take. For me, it was just, thinking about the fact that, it reminds me that I shouldn't put things off and I shouldn't ignore things. And, but yeah, I'm like, 95% of race fans who were not a Kyle Busch fan. He enjoyed being the bad guy, and I didn't hate him by any means, but so I'm not going to act like as if I'm a fan of him now, as he is an incredible talent. I mean, and seems like he was a great guy off the track. It seems like from what I've seen, that he was a great dad and everything else. And you got to hate bad news like this for the children most of all. But and I also look things a little differently too, because I don't talk about it too much on the show, but I'm a police officer, so I see death all the time. I like weekly. So I am a very deep thinker. I'm very spiritual, and I don't I don't know. I guess it doesn't hit me as hard because I'm a lot more at peace with death and the idea then, because we're all going to be there eventually. We all have an expiration date, and that's what I think that's what hit me, is that the day that I read about him passing away, it was like I was reading about him passing away as I was kissing my 5-month-old baby, over and over again to make him laugh, and sitting there thinking, that as I'm doing this, I can't help but think about, him and his kids and what they're going through. And, so it's, and I think that I take things a little differently than somebody else that doesn't have to see it a lot, So, yeah, but, it's horrible and, shocking. And like you said, it's very strange. Still don't really feel like he's not there. Because, I've been watching him. I met him, in the early 2000s at Daytona, in the fan zone, and, back when he was driving the 18 car, and, he was, I don't really remember too much about it, but I don't have a bad memory about it, and seemed like a good guy to his fans, and so that is something that I've enjoyed throughout the years. Is not that I am like bashing him or hating him, but there's times when I'm like, man, I miss some NASCAR drama, so I'll YouTube the best of Kyle Busch, and I'll watch an hour of Kyle Busch flipping people off or getting into fights or wrecking people, and that's good TV. So I throughout the years have realized how much I love the black hat, and I miss it because we don't have a whole lot of it anymore.
Well, not black hats that don't have a bratty personality. A lot of the
Right.
personalities coming up now, they're brats, and there's one in particular I could think of. I'm not going to say their name. I would think most people that are up to date with the current drivers and Cup probably know who I'm talking about, but it's hard to be a brat and wear a black hat. It's just, but I think, that's part of Kyle Busch's legacy as well is the fact that how hard he fought to maintain that persona, right? Now, since he's passed, a lot of people, including, acquaintances of mine, have come out and started to share these stories about Kyle, what he was like behind the scenes. I think they feel like more comfortable doing that now because he's no longer, he doesn't have to, there's no need to keep this curtain up, and I think, and Brick, I don't know if you have anything to back this thought up, but I think it was probably the same thing with Dale Sr. He was the intimidator. So you didn't want to put, all these heartwarming stories out there about the guy who you're supposed to be afraid of. When the black 3 comes up behind you on the track, your first thought should be, I got to get out of his way. And I think it's the same thing with Kyle Busch. He was a different type of tough guy than Dale Sr. Kyle Busch, like where the intimidator would run through you, it would be with Kyle Busch. What is he? Oh, here he comes. What's he going to do? What kind of mood is he in? Is he going to spin me? Is he going to bump me? Is he going to rough me up? And
I can say this when it comes to Kyle Busch. Again, I didn't know him personally. I never had any. I had some, just kind of minor, just in passing interactions with him, introductions when he was first getting into the sport, but never, anything sustained. So basically, what I know about Kyle is what everybody else knows: the public perception on TV and in the media. And I will say this: if Kyle Busch had treated me the way that I saw him treating other media members, we would have had some issues. and I can just imagine what my columns in Winston Cup scene would have been like. It would have been on, and my poison pen would have been cocked and ready to write some of these stories. That being said, and today I hear, before he passed, I always heard people saying things to the in the sense that he's showing personality. He's showing personality. He's showing us something different that's not vanilla or whatever. And my response to that, my thought to that was always, there's a difference between having a personality and being a a-hole. And he did go out of the way to have that kind of persona. Now, that being said, we did a memorial show to Kyle on the Same Vault podcast, and it just dropped yesterday on Wednesday. And we had Joe Dan Bailey on the show. Joe Dan is the son of H.B. Bailey, the longtime NASCAR independent driver. He worked for RCR, so he worked hand in hand with Dale Earnhardt. And for the past decades, he's been with Toyota. He's an engineer with TRD now. And he won over 100 races with Kyle in Xfinity. And so he came on the show. And he was talking about how Kyle refused to lose, and he wouldn't accept second place and all that. That was expected. Kyle Busch was a competitor. But regardless of what you think about Kyle Busch, I concluded the episode by asking Steve and Dan and Joe Dan and Chris Brown and Chris Powell, who is the president at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. So he grew up watching Kyle Busch race. Had great perspectives. But when I asked Joe Dan to define Kyle's legacy, he said that Kyle Busch will have a legacy will have an impact on the Bailey family for generations to come, because his son and daughter got a grant from Kyle and Samantha's Bundles of Joy foundation. They had that allowed them to do the IVF treatments. And now Joe Dan has twin granddaughters who are 2 years old because of that grant from Kyle and Samantha. So love him or hate him, he had that kind of impact on Joe Dan's family and however many others that I don't know about. And I didn't know that about Joe Dan when we started talking. And so I just thought that was the perfect conclusion to that episode. Joe Dan talking about Bundles of Joy. So was Kyle difficult to work with? From all indications, he was. I don't know what I see his interactions with Brexton. Appeared to be a good dad. Appeared to be present. Appeared to be active. Appeared to be loving. But I just hate it. I just hate it for those kids. Yeah, Samantha will I don't want to say she'll get over it, but she will be able to deal with those emotions with help from friends and family and clergy and whoever. But that story about the Bundles of Joy with Joe Dan, that pretty much closed the book for me. All right. Kyle was not a 100% all the time villain. He had a heart. And when it comes to Joe Dan Bailey and his family, that heart's going to live on for a long time.
Well, and I think too, his legacy in the sport or something he contributed. So one of the arguments with his stats versus somebody like the King, the 200 number floats out there and people want to start making comparisons. And as I said, coming into this video, two totally different eras, two totally different, the Cup Series back then is totally different than it was now as far as like the amount of races they would run each week, the amount of competitive teams the Wood Brothers are the longest running team in the sport, and they weren't even running full time back then. So, but storylines that helped the sport grow. Kyle Busch, I think of Kyle Busch winning all these truck races and then Kevin Harvick coming out and putting a bounty on him, saying anybody that can come out here and beat Kyle Busch, so that way he can stop winning these races. And then Chase Elliott stepped up, and there was the big, back then, Kyle was doing the bow, and if you weren't a Kyle Busch fan, you hated to see it. And then Chase Elliott goes out there, beats him in the truck race, and does the bow afterwards. And I think that's an integral part of somebody's greatness, right? So Richard Petty he is the king for a reason. NASCAR wouldn't be where it is without him. Doing what he did for the fans. I mean, how many other race car drivers had a car built specifically for them? Nobody. Nobody, not any, unless you're talking Formula One, where you're building a Formula One car around a race car driver. There's not one NASCAR Series Cup driver out there that had a car specifically built for them by a manufacturer. And so I think it's like the Mount Rushmore of NASCAR. Whose heads would you put on there? I think it's a lot more than stats. It's a lot of what did that person do to grow the sport. And to say that Kyle Busch didn't help grow the sport would be, I think it's just asinine. Because people showed up to watch their guy, and if their guy could beat Kyle Busch, that was just icing on the cake. So I'll let the stat bugs or whatever have their stat arguments. I know on Door Bumper Clear, they were talking about that this week. You know, is Richard Petty's 200, you know, is Kyle Busch's 263 more significant than Richard Petty's 200? It's a moot point. Two totally different eras, but that having been said, this Kyle Busch conversation has gone a lot longer than producer Josh would have liked. There were so many other topics we were going to touch on, and Rick, I don't want to keep you on all night, but Josh, is there anything in particular you want to bring up that you were really eager to talk about? Out of, I know, well, before I turn it over to you, I'm sorry, I'm hogging the show. I'm the host, dang it. I was excited about the Indy 500. Even before Katherine Legge announced she was doing a double, I'm going to come out and say this. I've been a Katherine Legge fan for years because I saw what she did in open wheel cars, and I saw what she did driving the Delta Wing sports car, and what she's done in all the racing disciplines that she's participated in. She is a racer through and through, and you're going to have some chauvinistic guys or chauvinistic people that are like, oh, well, she's a female driver. Well, you know what? She is a female racer, sir. She's doing a lot better than some other people have done. And so when she announced the double, I was geeking out and excited for it. Just for her to participate and even attempt the double was a substantial feat. And that didn't come to fruition, but she still put up with the long Coke 600 race with the rain delays and everything else. And she finished that out. And then the Indy 500 itself, my goodness, the finish to that race, you watch hundreds of races hoping to have that last corner, last lap pass. Yeah, I mean, the closest finish in Indy 500 history. Ironically enough, we had Al Unser Jr. on the show, who up until that point had the closest Indy 500 finish. Wow.
Well, it's I have a true confession to make. I'm not an INDYCAR guy. I've never followed the sport. You know, of course, I know Al Unser Jr. and I know Mario Andretti and I know AJ Foyt, and you know I know the highlights, but I know those names like somebody who doesn't follow NASCAR knows Richard Petty.
Right.
All right. So I'm not conversant in Indy 500 lore. Obviously, I respect the history and I understand the history. And, you know, Jim Neighbors singing every year. I'm a big Andy Griffith Show fan. So Jim Neighbors being anywhere is a big deal. But I have become in the past several months, I've become reacquainted with Jeffrey Baker, who was a crew member back in the 90s, team manager for Bobby Hamilton, senior at TriStar, and then went over to Penske. Had him on the podcast, and now he, you know, I was so impressed by his interview that I asked him to be a co-host on the podcast. And Jeffrey has worked for Penske Racing for the past, well, his first race, he joined Penske Racing, or what was then, I think it was Penske Cranafus. He joined them the weekend of the 1998 Daytona 500. And of course he was working on the 12 team with Jeremy Mayfield. So he was the only person within 1,000 miles of Daytona International Speedway that day who was racing, who was rooting against Dale Earnhardt to win that race. But because Jeffrey works for Penske Racing, he goes up every year and sets up the garage. You know, they have it furnished and they have it decorated. And so he goes up there and he helps put that together. And so this year, for the first time, I really paid attention to the Indy 500, you know, start to finish. And for the Penske driver to come in and say, I don't even remember the guy's name, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to fake it. I don't remember the guy. I don't remember the winner. Okay. All right. True confession. That's how much I don't follow it. But this year, for the first time that I can remember, I had a rooting interest in the Indy 500. But I was rooting for the Penske driver because of Jeffrey, who may or may not have promised me a milk bottle after the race if they won. So I do know that much about it. I do know there's milk involved. But yeah, that was a fantastic finish, man. That was a fantastic finish.
Yeah, the whole race was really good. That's something I really enjoy about IndyCar. I watched IndyCar for about 5 or 7 years when James Hinchcliffe drove. I got attached to him, and I enjoyed IndyCar then because I have to have somebody to root for. I'm not good at just being a casual fan. But he retired, and since then I just kind of haven't really found a reason to keep watching. But it was something that I've always noticed about IndyCar, and I don't know if it's Indy or if it's Fox or whoever, but they're always taken so seriously. Like, I mean, Indy 500 is obviously their most, their biggest race, their most serious race and everything, minus their hot dog races or whatever. It's night and day different between broadcast there and a broadcast, and NASCAR on Fox. For years, all the fans have been, whining and complaining about having superhero cartoons for drivers that shows up on the screen. And I was watching the Indy 500, and just like they even had cameras inside the guy's visor, like it wasn't just, and I mean, I was like, that's incredible. And so I was really blown away. I haven't watched IndyCar in years, and it makes me want to keep watching. But I enjoy rough racing too much, so that's always been the downfall for me with IndyCar, is that I like the ability to be able to put somebody in the wall and keep going. And obviously in IndyCar, it's a totally different game than stock cars. So.
Rick, thank you so much for joining the show, sharing some of your vast wealth of knowledge with us.
I appreciate you guys.
You will be high up on the list of backups next time I need one. Maybe even we'll have you on as the special major host next time.
Awesome. All right, guys.
All right, later, man.
All right, brother.
Yeah, we have gone long-winded. That's partially my fault. I do apologize, but I feel like the sport is at a delicate place with what's been going on in the past week, and I definitely wanted to highlight that, and not because I'm trying to ride the same tide that a lot of the other people are doing. It's just, and it's not that it's the popular thing to do. One thing, nobody's going to feel the effect of the loss of Kyle Busch, like his family, and seeing some of the random fans, try to exude or try to receive that same kind of affection from everybody else that the family's getting. I think that's a bit much. Kyle Busch was a great driver, one of the best of all time in the sport. So we had to dedicate a little bit of time to him. Appreciate Rick coming on. Anything else that you want to, because I know we had a long list and we've run long, but if there's anything else you want to talk about, I know Greenville Pickens committee meeting is on June 1st by the time we put this out.
Yeah, this will be out on the 2nd, but we have a list, but I knew, I know how things go, and especially bringing on somebody extra, that we're going to spend more time in one area than another. So it's kind of, you're just kind of rolling on the fly there. So, stuff that, we have that we were going to hit is not super important. I think the most important aspect to our conversation was Kyle Busch, and obviously the impact that he has made on the sport. And it was very cool to hear our super duper special guest co-host his thoughts and, all of the history that he's been around and how long he's been, he said he's been around the sport working it for 35 years. So that's incredible. So I was 5.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and not just, I mean, he was quick to point out to us before we got too in depth with, or before we even started, went live, or not live, but to let us know, hey, look, I haven't been really on the up and up with keeping up with what's like here is my area of expertise, and his area of expertise being back then when it is still relevant today, because like when you talk about loss in the sport, some of the topics we're going to touch on, the new race in San Diego, he touched on the fact that he was at the first Suzuka race. So NASCAR is still doing what it's always done, which is a good thing, because they're not standing still. They're not this, because I can't let it go. I know we're running long. I'm sorry. I apologize ahead of time. We need to talk about the All Star Race. We have to talk about the All Star Race. The debacle that is the All Star Race. That, dude, if you want to give that track a race, give them a race. Do not make it an All Star Race. That was the pomp and circumstance of an all-star. An all-star race is supposed to be your top guys going at it with one another. In the past, it was, hey, I don't want to call them disposable cars, but if we wreck these cars, we're racing for $1 million check. And there was, okay, you wreck a car, but you can bring it back out. Even if your lap's down, the next segment resets and you're still relevant. The whole thing from start to finish, and the location too. I don't have anything against the track. Yeah. I mean,
it's not one hot night. I mean,
no. And you know what? That's something else I'm going to touch on too, real quick. Off topic, not really off topic. Somebody had posted a video how Daytona is redoing their lighting system. And it's going to be, all these fancy LEDs, Musco's coming out. They're redoing the lighting. And he's like, well, Musco's the manufacturer that originally lit Daytona. Didn't even mention one hot night. It's like, dude, that's the biggest happening in NASCAR as far as lighting a track. One hot night, the All-Star Race, under the lights, Davey Allison knocking himself out, racing against Kyle Petty for the win. You're not going to get that moment at Dover during the day, running the absurdly long amount of time like they did. Now, I'm not saying go back to Daytona, but I am saying it needs to be at a track that is substantial. Not that Dover isn't. It needs to be at a track that represents the sport better. Not that Dover doesn't. And I'm not necessarily saying go back to Charlotte. You and I touched on this topic post-interview with Tasha Comer when we had her on to discuss Greenville Pickens. I thought we had a good idea. And with your permission, I'm going to just let the fans out there know what our damn good idea was.
Yeah.
So here's what you do. NASCAR, get your pen, get your stylus. If you got a pad, scribble on your little technologically advanced notepad, whatever. You bring back Greenville Pickens, a historically significant track to the sport of NASCAR. Right across town, there's another racetrack. I think what she said was Anderson.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you got two tracks within close proximity of one another. They're small local tracks at this point. Any kind of influx in money at those tracks would help the track, would help the infrastructure with everybody who's associated doing business with the track, and help the infrastructure and the economic situation of the town that the tracks are in. So the idea that we threw out there was Greenville Pickens is obviously the iconic track. So if you're going to have heat races and you want to have this big crescendo, this big happening of all stars, have heat races at one of the tracks close by, right? What do we say? Like 1 or 2 heat races, or, qualify. You have to earn your way in to Greenville Pickens. Then you have your big race at Greenville Pickens. And it doesn't have to be those 2 tracks, but there's so many locations, there's so many NASCAR sanctioned tracks dotted across the North American countryside. We could find tracks that are close enough to one another. And there's a lot of tracks out there that could use the financial bump.
Yeah.
Even something like that, because it's unique and it's different. And you do it 1 year, and you have to think outside the box. If this is going to be your all-star race, obviously it's not going to compete with Daytona. The Daytona 500 is the Daytona 500. The Indy 500 is the Indy 500. You're not going to outclass your top-notch races. But you can sure as heck try to make a memorable weekend for your best drivers. If these are your best drivers in your top-notch series, you can go out, then make them go out there and earn this thing, right? I mean, you already did away with the shootout races. Yeah, we used to look forward to every year. I mean,
yeah,
there's other tracks that can benefit from an all-star race, and
I think that your idea is definitely the best idea to give back to these small communities. It all started when NASCAR started looking into going back to North Wilkesboro, and regardless of what the actual intent was of why they went back, and the all of that, that's definitely the most we should be emphasizing more of the local short track deal, because that's where everybody starts. And that's to where it used to be. Nowadays I don't really know where they all start, because we got a William Byron that shows up and he's an iRacing guy. So but times have changed, and but I do agree with that. If it wasn't going to be that and it was just going to be another NASCAR sanctioned race, my vote would just be Charlotte. I think it's great racing. Almost any car iteration that we get, I've always enjoyed Charlotte, and it's close to them, and I think it's just better for the NASCAR community. My vote for the most exciting track that we have now, and with the car that we have, is Atlanta. So Atlanta would give you that highlight reel finish that they want. And I love Atlanta. I love the way it's turned out. I love that it's pack racing, but it's not, cluttered like Talladega or Daytona. And, eventually it's going to lose that. It's going to stretch out more and more, but wear out more. But, and I'd like to see, and this will never happen, but I would like to see them let either as a company make changes to the car to experiment and try something new, or open the rule book up a little bit. Let these guys find something, right? Because you look at like when the whole the T-Rex car, and got outlawed. They didn't break any rules, but there definitely was rules after the race, and that's great. And I think that's we can only learn from that. It could make the sport better, to see if, okay, well, what did the 24 camp do that made the car so much faster? Maybe this is something we need to do to all the cars, and it would make the sport better. But I don't think that'll ever happen, because NASCAR
it comes down to money and finances and contracts. Yeah. I mean, whether or not I don't know if people have stopped to think about it, but what you have in NASCAR is almost identical to what you have in INDYCAR. And it's the same company. Dallara makes the INDYCAR race cars. And then the different manufacturers produce different engines. And then the different teams put the cars together and put the engines in the cars. And it's the same thing you got going on in the Cup Series right now. Right? You got rid of... You have a sport that started out as Moonshiners or guys with fast cars having the same conversation I have with guys at work. Oh, you think your car's fast? Yeah, my car's fast. You think it's faster than my car? Hell yeah, it's faster than my car. You got someplace we can run? Hell yeah, let's go. And then you do it. So that's how you start. And then eventually you get to the point where you got to start bringing in specialists because, hey, our cars are breaking. Why are our cars breaking? Because we don't know how to do this. Well, this guy knows how to do this. So you had all these specialists surrounding it. And then, we saw it at Talladega with the Twisted Sister cars, right?
Yeah.
And now it's one car, one body. You can change the nuts and bolts you use. If you want to use Bob's nuts and bolts instead of Ted's nuts and bolts, that's your choice. But you're still putting the pieces of the puzzle together to build a car. And then whichever engine manufacturer of choice you choose to go with, that's what's going to be in the car. That's not what stock car racing's about. It was supposed to be cheaper. Denny Hamlin's come out and said it's not cheaper. They defeated the purpose of that a couple years ago. So trash this car because the car, it's poopy caca racing. I mean, dude, did you see the racing in O'Reilly Series and Truck Series at Charlotte this past weekend?
Yep.
Compared to the Cup Series? Oh, come on, man. When the bottom 2-tier series are putting on a better show than Cup, what are we doing, guys? You've got a smoking hot supermodel that you could take to prom, but instead you're putting lipstick and a wig on a pig and bringing it to prom while the supermodel sits at home alone. No, I mean,
yeah, the sport of the Cup Series it's not in a good place if we are relying on Goodyear to make our product better. And that's what I watched a video of Kenny Wallace and his little coffee with Kenny today and talking about, is this next gen car are we able to save it, or is it savable or whatever? And he was talking about praises about, the tire and, that Goodyear brought their best tire and there was more passing and this and that. And that might be true, but we shouldn't have to be relying on Goodyear saving when we have all these $1 million cars. And and then on top of that, I mean, talk about Goodyear, your adjustments to the car, it's nothing like it used to be even 5 years ago. And it's like, you're a little tight. Okay, we'll take a tenth out of your left front tire and this and that. Like that's the adjustments now is air pressure, and it's like, it's the ingenuity, the creativeness behind NASCAR is gone. And I understand that they have to have rules but you can't just completely neuter everything, because then it just becomes, like you said, it becomes IndyCar is just boring. It's just not, I want the creativeness, and that's a part of, that's the way NASCAR always has been. And unfortunately that's the way it's not going anymore. But
IndyCar is not boring. There are IndyCar races that are a bit lackluster, but if we're going to attach boring to something, I forgot, like, legitimately, this is how horrible it is. And if you speak with an accent and you love your cars without fenders and I'm hurting your feelings, I'm sorry, I don't care. You know why? Because I don't have a speech impediment. This is an artificial one. This is how I talk. I'm an American. Red-blooded American. I love V8 muscle cars. I love NASCAR. I also love IndyCar. IndyCar is so much better than Formula One. I forgot Cadillac was even running Formula One this year until I saw a headline where they're talking about, is this driver doing what they should be doing in the Cadillac? All I know about IndyCar is the fiasco that was not putting Colton Herta behind the wheel of a Cadillac. And why do I know who Colton Herta was? Because he was a wheelman in IndyCar. He was a massive talent in IndyCar, and now he's having to gather points in the under series just to compete in Formula One. Makes absolutely no sense. And then if you look at the people that are in charge of the FIA and that are in charge of Formula One, it makes perfect sense why I've got bug zappers that are a heck of a lot more fun to watch. Dude, you ever see a fly get zapped, electrocuted, the sound it makes, just the visual of it? I mean, I'm sorry, maybe that's very redneck of me. I don't care. That's more fun than watching 6 drivers on 3 different teams compete. That's the other thing. I'm going to temper this a little bit, right? I was going to say for shites and cripes, out of curiosity, I was like, I saw Lando Norris at the Indy 500 congratulating his buddy that had won. Why is Lando Norris, who the heck is winning all the Formula One races? And it's like one dude, and it's a dude who I'm not even familiar with. And there's a reason I'm not familiar with him, because these Formula One drivers, unless you're Daniel Ricciardo or somebody like that, they have no personalities. I mean, say what you want about Lewis Hamilton, but at least he's got a personality. Max Verstappen, probably one of the greatest racers on the planet right now. That's how I knew who Max Verstappen is, because he goes out there and he wins and he dominates in everything he gets behind the wheel of. But Formula One, sorry guys, it sucks. Oh, and 2, I'm sorry, producer Josh, I know we're going long, but geez Louise, Pandora's box is open. Guess who is going to be the namesake of one of the Formula One teams? And this is how you know Formula One is not meant for red-blooded Americans that are out there celebrating their red, white, and blue star-spangled banner flying high. You people came to us to come help you out because you see crumpets and blah, 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 blah. Without America, y'all would all be speaking German, all right? That having been said, I'm sorry, this is very passionate, off topic. But think Gucci. I kid you not, Gucci is going to be the namesake for one of the Formula One teams. How do you want me to have less interest in Formula One? Tell me Gucci is one of the team names. Okay. Yeah. Okay, y'all keep doing what y'all are doing over there, and we'll just keep kicking ass over here in our NASCARs.
Derek, I appreciate your passion, and I agree wholeheartedly. I feel like this is a life-changing moment for you, where you can start spelling tires the correct American way. So
no, it's too much fun getting arousal out of you.
For everybody who doesn't know, he doesn't know that there's an I in tires. He thinks there's a Y, and it's tires.
And it's not gravel pits; it's kitty litter.
But
but they're getting rid of the kitty litter anyway. They're paving everything and anything. I will say this, and I have said it before in the past: if you want to watch a sport that's not naturally North American motorsport, MotoGP is one of the most fascinating sports to watch, motorsports to watch. So if you haven't yet, try it. As a matter of fact, we had talked earlier in this episode with Rick about where safety has come and how we need not lose sight on it. They had a few drivers in MotoGP this past weekend before last, that got hurt. Thankfully not too bad, but yeah. So forget the cars with the wings, and unless they're American cars with wings and fenderless. But yeah, because that Indy 500 race was badass, and you're not going to get that out of Formula One. That is how Indy cars justify themselves, because they have badass racers, and that's the most diversity I would like to see in a starting grid. What you have in INDYCAR, which there are still some American drivers there. Joseph Newgarden is a freaking badass. So yeah. I don't know. I think, has this show gone off the rails?
It has.
Yeah.
But well, I think it's about time to wrap it up, Derek. Would you like to let everybody know how to make our show successful?
Yes. Yes, I would. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are at war right now. I saw a NASCAR video the other day, and I'm going to admit I was slightly entertained by this guy who knows nothing about our sport. But this is on my feed. How the heck does a guy who doesn't know anything about NASCAR get on my feed in YouTube? I'm going to tell you how that stuff happens, because you don't like and subscribe to the channels of substance. The channels like the Also Ran broadcast. Please, if you're watching this and for whatever reason you have not subscribed to the channel yet, this is a twofold attack. We're going to defeat the YouTube algorithm. We're going to put quality content on your page when you need it. And you're going to help me and producer Josh retire from our daily jobs, because we need cush jobs where all we do is sit around and talk about racing with racers or with people in the industry. And we need to beat the algorithm in order to do that. So, yeah, please like and subscribe. If you happen to be listening on the audio realm, I don't know why you would be doing that. You're missing out on this moneymaker here. Some would say I have a face for radio, but they also went to school at the Helen Keller Institute, so they don't know what they're talking about. But yeah, if you're listening on the audio realm, go ahead and give us a rate and review. Please like and subscribe to the channel. And most importantly, if you like or if you don't like what we're doing, we are always open to comments and opinions to help us grow, help us become the show that you cannot wait to see the next episode of. In the meantime, producer Josh, we good?
Good.
All right. Then I'm going to say goodbye for now. I hope you enjoyed this. This was a long-winded one, but I felt it was needed. Thoughts and prayers with the Busch family through these trying times. And literally, just know that God has a plan, and it's not in our best interest to know his plan. And everything has a purpose, a rhyme, and a reason to it. He knows it, even if we don't. So have faith. Know that if you put your faith in God, you're putting it in the best place it can be. He's going to take care of you. In the meantime, y'all keep your wheels down and your eyes on the crown.
Let me read Hebrews 12:1 real quick. Therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw up everything that hinders and the sin so easily entangles. Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let's freaking go.